Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. In today's video, we're switching gears a little bit on the Chevelle build to get the accessory drive installed on the 6.0. I'll be installing a complete serpentine system from Eddy Motorsports. It comes with a lot of upgraded components, and the overall look is going to complement the engine bay very, very nicely. We basically wanted to black everything out, which is kind of an untraditional look for one of these cars. We just didn't want to have a whole lot of chrome and shiny stuff. This is going to look really, really mean, especially with all of the upgraded Holley stuff that's on the motor. So very, very excited to finally see pretty much the final look of the engine come together in this video. But what I really like about this serpentine system, it comes with absolutely everything that you need to get it all put on the motor in one go. And there's a lot of upgraded stuff in here that, is very much improved over factory stuff. So we've got the power steering pump with billet reservoir. There's the water pump right there. Sand and AC compressor, an SFI rated harmonic balancer, and a higher output alternator. So I'm basically going to start plowing through these instructions right now, and we'll start putting things together. Before we get started, I'd like to extend a huge shout out to Original Parts Group for supporting this build. They offer pretty much anything and everything that you need to restore and modify all sorts of classic GM vehicles. Be sure to support the brands to support the channel. It really means a lot. I've got some links down in the description box below to their product catalogs, of course, and related parts that we're using in this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. While I wait on my correct flex plate adapter to show up, we're going to skip the balancer install and go ahead and move on to installing the water pump. We've got 5 studs right there to get it all set in place, so let's get to it. So far, so good. Next up is the rear alternator bracket and a couple of those spacers. Next up are the spacers for the AC compressor, as well as the thermostat and housing. Next is the rear AC bracket. And the water pump pulley. At this point, I'm going to have to do a little bit of modification. Apparently on some LS blocks, there's only 1 out of 3 mounting holes that would typically be used to mount the power steering bracket. Mine is unfortunately one of those that only has 1 hole. So what I'm going to end up needing to do is use the power steering bracket as a jig and actually drill and tap a hole into the block as shown there. let's get this bracket mounted. Alright, the power steering bracket is installed and it looks great. Eddie Motorsports also mentions that using 2 out of the 3 potential mounting holes is perfectly acceptable. It's not going to affect performance or reliability because, as you guys saw earlier, this motor doesn't even have a provision to be able to mount the 3rd bolt even if it wanted to. So it's perfectly squared up and secure. Now we can move on. Something else I'm going to have to work around, which really isn't that big of a deal, I can figure it out later, is the reservoir for the power steering pump. I was hoping I was going to have enough space to run the attached reservoir setup, but there's just not near enough space between the pump mounting bracket and the steering gearbox itself. FYI, Eddie Motorsports actually offers 2 different types of attached reservoir setups. You've got the standard plastic one and this one, which is very nice billet aluminum. But I'm gonna have to run a remote reservoir setup anyway, most likely, due to the fact that I'm gonna use a Hydro Boost braking setup from Classic Performance products. So I would have probably had to modify this one anyway, but it doesn't matter. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this reservoir, get the pump mounted, and you guys will be able to see a little bit more accurately what I'm talking about with regards to space. Here you guys can get a better idea of just how little space I'm working with right here. I think it's gonna be okay. Worst case scenario, I might end up not being able to use that little CPP dress-up cover for the steering box, or maybe I can use it with a little modification. It just depends on how well the power steering line adapter fittings fit in there. To finish all that up, we need to install the power steering pump pulley, then we'll move on to installing all of the alternator stuff. We are nearing completion. Next, I'll be installing the AC compressor bracket, the compressor itself, the cover, and then we'll move on to the belt tensioner. Alright, I just received my flex plate spacer. In short, from the factory, my motor would have come with a dished flex plate that did not require a spacer. This flex plate is flat. It's an SFI certified upgraded flex plate, but being that it is flat, it needs a spacer, just AC Delco flex plate spacer for an LS application to be able to bring the flex plate out far enough for proper clearance with the motor and proper engagement with the starter Bendix. So this flex plate can work with either a 4L60 torque converter or a 4L80 torque converter like I have. So we're gonna go ahead and get this stuff in place so we can lock it all down and install the harmonic balancer and crank pulley. And there we have it. With the flex plate installed, I can use this little tool that's probably hard to see with everything being black, but it's a flex plate holder. It meshes with the ring gear teeth and bolts in place of the starter to keep the rotating assembly from turning while I install the harmonic balancer and everything else up front. The factory crank bolt is a torque to yield bolt. I really like ARP's products, and in the past I've used their crank bolt, which is actually reusable. It comes with its own fastener, lubricant, and all of that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, with how the billet crank pulley is with this setup, I had to use a factory bolt. There just wasn't enough clearance in the center bore to fit this head, so I'll end up using this on another build. All that's left now is the belt and belt tensioner cover. And here we have it. It's all really coming together now. I went ahead and threw a couple other things on. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to go ahead and get the headers installed just so we can see how they look with that new titanium coating from Jet Hot. I also went ahead and just loosely put on the throttle body just so we can get a more complete picture of what the engine's going to look like at final assembly. I've used Jet Hot high performance coatings on a number of my other builds. Best part is they're pretty local to me in Burlington, North Carolina. They offer a variety of coatings depending on your specific horsepower goals, as well as colors for any style of build. My previous builds have all used their classic polish coating, but we decided to go with this titanium coating on the Chevelle, as again, most of the engine bay is blacked out. This will definitely give it a little bit of extra contrast, but it still has a matte finish and will help keep heat from radiating out. Check out their website in the description box below to see what all they offer. Well everyone, that's going to wrap it up for this video. The engine is starting to really come together. It looks fantastic. If you'd like to learn more about this particular accessory drive, or just to peruse all of the parts catalogs that Original Parts Group has to offer, again, I've got all of those links down in the description box below. If you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so, because of course there's always a lot more content where that came from, and don't forget to leave a like down below because it really helps the videos a lot. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.